Mic check, 1, 2. All right. It is 5:32, and I am going to call this school board work session to order. Um, School board would like to take this moment to respectfully acknowledge that we are residing on the traditional land of the Dene people. Our mission is to provide an excellent, equitable education in a safe, supportive environment so all students will succeed and contribute to a diverse and changing society. Ms. Richardson, would you please call the roll?
Miss Carol Hubbard,
Here.
Mr. Doran,
Here.
Miss Julian,
Here.
Miss Maple is on Zoom,
Here.
Mrs. Hardy,
Here.
Mr. Burgess,
Here.
and Mrs. Burnett is on Zoom.
I'm here.
Thank you. The
Great.
board has a quorum.
Thank you. That brings us to our agenda item of proposed budget work. At this point, I will hand it over to Dr. Miner.
All right, thank you, Mr. Burgess. This evening, we'll continue to go over the budget. Mr. DeGraw has some initial opening remarks to answer some questions that came up last time. And then the bulk of today's session, I think, will be spent in balancing act for board members to go through different scenarios and look at what's currently in the tool, and working through that. Of course, if there's questions, hopefully there are questions and dialogue that come up throughout that process. We'll do our best to answer any questions that you may have tonight throughout this budget process, but if there's other things that we need to bring back for the next work session, we can certainly do that. We have Michelle here taking great notes for us, and so we'll be sure to write down any questions that the board has. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. DeGraw, and we'll get into answering some of the questions that the board had last time.
All right, thank you, Dr. Miner. So yeah, we'll start up, if we can get my screen onto the monitors. This is going to be in response to a couple of requests by board members. They both might have been from Ms. Julian, but several of the requests are incorporated into the Balancing Act tool, added options for board members to select. We'll be seeing those later on this evening. This first slide here that we're seeing, and I'll preface this with some of this information will be difficult to follow. You might not grasp everything in the time that I have it up on the screen, but we will email these two documents to the board. We'll get them to Ms. Richardson, and then she'll get them to the full board. So this one is showing the benefit rate by year. It's going back about 12 years, I think, to 2015. Row 3 here, if people can see my cursor, row 3 here shows the specific benefit rate related to health insurance, starting back in 2015 at 30%. And then you can see the changes or lack of change by year. It dipped in 2019, a couple of percentage points remained there that went back up, stayed steady for several years, and then this year for FY26, this budget cycle, we're needed to add to that benefit rate, and I'll talk about that, the reasons why here in a moment. The row 4 is the amount of dollars that benefit rate was expected to generate based on the budgeted salaries for that year. So total dollars expected to be generated. The second part of this, and it's directly related to the benefit rate, is the risk fund ending year fund balances. That was also requested. And this is really the most important metric here, in my opinion. It's really the measuring stick or the gauge of, is the benefit rate that we have built into the equation, is that generating enough revenue to support our claims that are running through the fund? So back in 2015, we see a fund balance of $54,000, so it's quite low. This fund has spent time in the negative. If you look back 20 to 30 years, there has been years where it had went negative, which I'm staunchly opposed to in this arena. Jumped to 700,000, and then you see a big spike for years 2017 and 2018. the district changed the makeup of its health insurance plans in 2017. It might have been the end of 2016, but there was a higher than expected level of savings that those plan redesigns generated. And so that's why you see the spike. And if you look back up to the benefit rate, that's where we were able to reduce the benefit rate. So the savings generated through the plan redesign of the health plans was a direct benefit to the general fund. It allowed us to reduce that benefit rate by 2%, which generated a huge savings to the general fund. So there's a direct link between efficiencies and savings that we can find in our benefits packages for employees and general fund expenditures needed from the general fund. So we reduced it. We see a dip back down. So basically, because of that spike in the fund balance, we were able to lower the benefit rate and draw that fund balance down million six in FY20, and then back we raised it again in FY21, built it back up to 3.6, 3.3, and then this year the fund balance in the risk fund had actually dropped to close to $1 million. There was a significant drop this year, and administration made an additional charge to the general fund to shore up the fund balance in the risk fund. So brought it back to the $3 million level is where it ended in FY24. So that's what necessitated the need for the increase in the FY26 budget that you see is we began to significantly deficit spend between FY23 and 24, and we expect that trend to continue in FY25. So we'll be watching that because, as you note, the increase in the benefit rate won't happen until next school year. So we're still at the 30.86 level that we've noticed is not gathering enough dollars from the general fund to the risk fund to support our claims, and so we'll continue to monitor the fund balance in that risk fund and continue tracking it. Any questions on this?
Mrs. Hardy.
Not so much a question, but I went back and I listened to the joint work session and the part you just brought up that you had the significant fund balance from risk management. And just so that anyone else as board historian unofficially, that fund balance and our ability to be more fiscally responsible and get more out of that money was exactly what caused the borough to come and take that over $7 million. That's what created a surplus.
I estimated the total savings at that point. So I was new to the district. I'd
3
been about
months.
6. Yeah, at the point of that, at about the 6 month, 3 month, we had the joint work session. At the 6 month mark, I went back and analyzed the estimated savings from those plan redesigns, and it was up in the 12 to 15 million total dollars that the district had saved over a couple of year period of time. And so, yes, that plan redesign was a huge factor in the fund balance being there at the levels where the borough was having a little bit of heartache about. But yes, it was prophetic. I said at that time, this is many years ago, it seems like 30 years ago, but that the district was going to need those dollars, and sure enough, we did need the dollars. So
Ms.
in
Julian.
short, huge savings from those plan redesigns.
Ms. Julian.
Thank you. Ooh, that's really loud. What, can you talk a little bit more about what's causing the deficit funding in the most recent years, and also the impact to educators? I know that was a really big pressure point this fall for our educators and shifts to the benefit rate. And
Yeah, just a significant increase in overall health insurance costs and health care, not just insurance, but just the cost of health care has gone up significantly. And I think we've seen headlines in the paper of not just the school district, but the borough and other entities just feeling huge pressure on those increased health costs. And, depending on the organization, I don't know of any organization where employees are picking up the lion's share of those costs. It's the organizations are picking up the lion's share of those costs. And so that's impacting our bottom line. We were able to get by with the benefit rate that we had, the 30.86 for several years. And just over time, as those general industry-wide costs have increased, now the costs to the district have significantly surpassed what we're getting from the general fund. And so that's what's necessitated that increase in the benefit rate. We talked about a lot during the time where we were looking at healthcare, the hard cap. So that protects the district. That's a big component of capping the liability of the district. So I would anticipate that 32% level that we're at should be adequate, because we have the hard cap in place, and that again limits. Now, certainly healthcare will be a part of negotiations going forward, so the liability of the district could increase. Over time, at some point, obviously it will increase, but we'll be able to identify exactly what different liability levels, given different scenarios, that the district will incur, and that'll be a huge benefit to the district planning-wise going forward. But yeah, I rambled there quite a bit, but I think the short of the answer is just generally increasing healthcare costs and some significant increases.
Mr. Dorn.
Two questions, if I might. On the benefit rate for this year, it's the same as last year, but we changed the benefit rate at the beginning of this year. Am I correct?
The proposed benefit rate increase there wouldn't be till next year. So for this year, it has stayed steady, that 30.86, the same benefit rate that we've had the last 3-4 years, actually.
Follow up on that one.
Yeah.
Just help me understand. We raised the costs that the district picked up some and the employees picked up some. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Fall. So the benefit rate, actually, the effective benefit rate went up because we had to raise more money on both sides.
So these are apples and oranges, actually. So this benefit rate that we're seeing, all that is the number that determines how much we're grabbing from the general fund and then dumping in the risk fund. And those dollars are there to just pay ongoing claims and liabilities of the district. What we were negotiating before with the unions was a separate topic. That's what's going to be the split. So of total health costs, what's going to be the split between the district, what the district's going to cover, and what employees are going to cover. And so that technically is a separate topic from what we're looking at here.
Right. That's why I'm not looking at the
Yeah.
risk management fund right now. That's my second question.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at the benefit rate. We effectively raised the benefit rate because we raised those contributions from the district and from the employee side. Right? Last September.
Not in this sense that we're looking at on the slide, but you're talking about not the slide. So I think it might be a terminology issue that we're going back and forth on.
Okay.
We increased through the agreement that we reached with the unions, premium rates for employees were increased.
Right.
So that was definitely increased for employees.
That increased how much benefit we had to pay out. We had to cover. Okay.
Yeah.
The second question is in terms of the fund, what is our typical claims that we need to have, typically this much in the fund because that's how much we're going to pay out during that year?
Yeah, that's a good question.
It can vary greatly, but what's
Sure.
our typical?
Yeah, really minimum amount of dollars cycling in and out of this fund on an annual basis is at least in the $35 million range, or something that can go to 40. I would say a $35 to $40 million annual transaction rate. So I like to have somewhere around 10%, which is the $3 to $4 million range. And you can see kind of that's where we got it leveled out at in the last 3 to 4 years. So, certainly there's no hard, fast, solid number that we're required to hold, but I generally like to keep a 5 to 10% number there.
Great, thank you.
Mrs. Hardy.
It was just more to Mr. Doran's point, because I think I understood what he was trying to say, which was our hard cap remained unchanged through the negotiations. And so that capped how much we pay. And then with our unions, we agreed to use the money differently, but we didn't put any new money towards healthcare from the district side. They changed it. So that's, I think, the piece, is that it was the same amount of money. We just allowed them to use it in a different way. It became HSAs, or you could take money from one pot to another.
Yeah, I mean, it's accurate to say that we didn't increase the liability of the district in those negotiations. So the term premium levels for employees were increased. But yeah, benefit rate is kind of the term we're hung up on. So the way my office uses benefit rate is what's shown here, but I think we're talking about premium levels is what increased.
Could you define what benefit rate is? Because I think I kind of know what it is, but maybe I don't fully know what it is.
So the benefit rate is the percentage that we charge each dollar of salary that is paid out to employees district-wide. And it also applies not just to the general fund, but also to grant funded employees as well. So for every dollar, current year, 30.86% is charged to that dollar. So just shy of 31 cents of every dollar is additionally charged to the general fund and then set aside in the risk fund. So that's the percentage of each dollar that we pay out goes to pay health claims.
Follow up? Just so that means that's like a charge we're charging ourselves to make sure we have the money to pay the debt.
Correct.
But it's not creating new money. It's not charging our employees more. It is just the formula we use to make sure we have money in the risk fund to cover our debts.
Yes, that's
Okay,
accurate.
Thank you.
And I would, just to finish out that, I would be a proponent of having some way of communicating that effectively to our staff in general. I think oftentimes folks don't realize. I think there's more and more awareness because of headlines in the paper, and then just, people's pocketbooks are getting hit more and more. Everybody is, right? So I think just a general awareness of someone's total compensation, including the benefits package that we pay out to employees, would be effective just for awareness of how much things cost these days. So.
Ms. Carol Hubbard?
Thank you. I'm not exactly sure how to ask my question. I'm looking at 17, fiscal year 17, and you said there was a significant increase in healthcare costs, or no, we changed benefit insurance plans.
Yeah, we redesigned our health plans.
So what did we do in 19? Why did it how did we save $8 million in 17, and then we added not quite $1 million to that same to the fund down below? I'm just
So
go ahead. Do you know what I'm trying to ask?
yes,
Are
how
you
did
reading my
we see
mind?
that big of a drop
Yeah,
in
yeah.
1 year?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not sure I'm going to be able to exactly answer that question without going back and looking at the specific numbers of that year. My guess is it was a combination of two things. One is that we implemented the plan redesigns in 2017. There was I have seen a chart, there was an initial big drop. But then after that initial big drop, kind of the bottom was reset, and then they started to creep back up again. Okay, so combination of actually three things. We reduced the benefit rate, so that was drawing fewer dollars into the fund.
Okay.
We dropped the amount that we charged the general fund and sent over, so that was going to reduce. Increasing just that natural, it dropped, and then it started to trend back up again. So expenses started to increase, combined with fewer dollars going in. So there's two. And then it's possible, this is what I'm not 100% sure. It's possible because over time, health claims do this. You're gonna have some tough cases and claims are gonna spike. And then all of a sudden, just for a variety of different reasons, you'll have years where claims go low. If things are going great and claims are really low, it's not a matter of if, it's when they're gonna return, right? And so it's possible that we could have seen, just in addition to industry trend increases in costs, we saw maybe some tough cases and a spike in claims as well.
So that spike in claims, I'm sorry, can I,
And that's, I'm not 100% sure that occurred, but it's at least we started drawing fewer dollars, and then the increase in costs did begin again.
so just to follow that logic, just to make sure I'm kind of tracking, that if we had a spike in claims that would result in the drop, that would have happened in 18, therefore we see this huge drop in 19? Is that what,
No, it would have occurred
at the wrong,
it would have occurred in 19.
it would have occurred in
Yep.
19? Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I don't have Zoom open in front of me, so I'm just going to check if Ms. Maple or President Burnett have questions. Hearing none.
They don't have their hands raised.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Richardson.
All right.
Please continue. Mr. DeGraw.
Mr. Burgess. And so this next sheet, again, we'll email this to the board. This is a comparison looking back 3 years of our expenditures segregated out by function. So I think this was another request from Ms. Julian looking at, we showed a percentage in the proposed budget, which is right here. This one's a little bit harder to compare, but this is the FY26 proposed budget percentages here in column E of those expenditures separated out by function. So instruction, special ed, student support services, et cetera, et cetera. And so looking back, looking at FY25 comparatively, and then FY24. And so just important to note that the FY26 is the proposed budget, so not the final approved, and then 25 and 24 being the final approved budgets for those years. Just anecdotally, just real quick, 41, just shy of 42% to instruction in FY24, 41.5% in the proposed budget in FY26. For special ed, 19.5% in the proposed budget, just shy of 18, so a little bit of an increase there. Yeah. So again, just comparing the percentages broken out by function, looking back a couple of years. And we will email this to the board as well.
Mrs. Hardy.
Ms. Richardson has emailed it, so we've got it. You
Got
checked
it.
your emails.
That's
The piece it says on fiscal year 26, other, is that the transportation subsidy?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Ms. Julian.
Thank you for breaking this out. I know that last year we increased class sizes. Is that correct?
In secondary by one student in middle and high school.
Okay. Would that be okay? Okay. Thank you.
And that would be in the instruction function. Yes. So, one can just anecdotally look at instruction in the FY26 proposed budget. There's a 2% decrease. I could safely say that's a product of the PTR increase that's found in the FY26 proposed budget.
Go ahead, Ms. Deline.
Can I ask from last year, are you able to share how much, if any, fund balance was used to balance last year's budget?
None.
None? Okay.
Mr. DeGraw.
All right. So thank you to Ms. Richardson for emailing that information out. We will now pivot to kind of the outline that Mr. Burgess and Dr. Miner outlined. We will have the balancing act tool up on the screen. And at the board's pleasure, we'll go through scenarios as you see fit. I don't know how, if we just want to go one by one and run some scenarios. Ms. Nielsen is here to take some copious notes, and I'll try to keep up as much as I can. I think this is a similar format to what we did last year, what we followed last year, and just run in different scenarios. And obviously new to the new board members, but we'll just be able to go through on the revenue side on the left. We have various different choices on the local revenue as well as state revenue options. Do that, and then corresponding expenditure side, we can look at different items that the board wants and scenarios that the board would like to look at.
Ms. Carol Hubbard.
Just a quick question. Over the weekend, we had this available. And so I went through a few times and it did say submit. Did I submit to somebody? Did I? Yeah, I did. And so did it go anywhere?
It goes to me.
Oh, okay. I was just curious if it actually, I didn't know who got, thank you.
Excuse me, Ms. Maple has some questions.
Okay, Ms. Maple. If you're speaking, Ms. Maple, we can't hear you. You may be on mute. Ms. Maple, are you able to come off mute?
Melissa can hear me.
Okay, there, we can hear you now.
You can hear me?
Yes. Go ahead, Ms. Maple.
Aha! Thank you. I was saying that I did the same thing as Miss Carol Hubbard and put together a potential scenario. I don't know if working through a potential one and then building off that, or if other folks have scenarios, but I'd be happy to share mine if that would be a helpful way to proceed, and if not, totally fine also, obviously.
Please go ahead.
Okay, sorry, I want to
One,
minimize.
one moment, Mr. DeGraw has a.
Yeah, Ms. Maple, if you want to just verbally go through, starting on the revenue side and then go over to the expenditure side, we'll follow you and be taking
Okay.
notes and demonstrate your scenario on the screen here in the boardroom.
Okay, so I will warn you all that my first one is quite on revenue, it's rosy. On revenue, I increased to 64, and I will say that I experimented back and forth between wanting to increase local revenue to 64 or wanting to go for that $1,000 BSA like we saw Anchorage do. But for the purpose of this, I increased at the local. I left projected as I left everything else as suggested. And then on the elementary side, I put PTR back to 25. And I did not reduce library associates.
Okay.
I can't see your screen while I have this
Okay.
up, so please.
Thank you for
if I
telling
could-
me that. So yeah, so the revenue adjustment created a $4 million surplus, and then the reduction in elementary PTR back to 25 was a cost of $2.3 million. So your top line surplus right now is at $1.7 million.
Perfect. And then I left, oh, that was actually a mistake. Reduced the 6 through 8 PTR back to 29.
Okay. Now a $1.2 million surplus.
And 9 to 12 to 32.
Okay, now a $790,000 surplus.
I added back high school counselors.
470 surplus.
I left no change to activities all the way through. And then district-wide, I invested in supply budgets.
Okay, $400,000 surplus remaining.
Education options, I added best satellite and both locations of a best satellite.
Okay, $108,000 surplus remaining.
Okay, and then curriculum, I left the same. Laptops, I reduced by the 350, just the one level. I mean, I know it's not just anything, but
Okay, so back to a $408,000 surplus.
and then I reduced district staffing. I changed that to $300 savings instead of $500 savings.
Let's see.
Not 500,
Sorry, Ms. Maple.
400,000.
What? To 300, okay. Okay, so now we're at a $208,000 surplus.
And then my suggestion I would put in the bottom is to add a 0.5 FT, to add one counselor,
Okay,
which would pretty much get it to, there would not be a surplus anymore, pretty much. So that was my, as I went through and tried to envision what it could look like if there was that increase from either BSA or the state or the borough. I mean, yeah, this is what the cuts that I would envision keeping our our schools in better shape. Then yeah, so something to start with, a rosy one. It's not even rosy. That's not even a fair thing to call it, but it's a hopeful in terms of local revenue one. So that's where I started. Interested to see where other folks landed, or what any of those specific cuts or reversals of cuts, how that sits with anybody else.
Ms. Doolin?
Thank you. I'd like, instead of going through the entire thing, it might be cleaner to just start with the revenue side and talk about that. I think that it's very rosy and almost unrealistic to put in that 64 million after we closed schools. 3 words showed up after that $60 million ask from the mayor, which is will be difficult. Getting to $60 million will be difficult. Showed up Wednesday, the 5th of February. I don't necessarily see that one increasing, so I wouldn't feel comfortable basing a budget off of that. However, I would feel comfortable with that, the BSA equivalent of $800 increase. That one seemed more realistic based on the conversations that we had in Juneau. And another revenue area, although it's on the expense side, in transportation, and I'm only putting this out there just because this is kind of a revenue conversation as well that's happening in Juneau, and that is around transportation funding. The proposed budget from the governor would equal us only, it's a 20% increase, which would mean that we would only have to put in 1.5 million. And that's where I landed on revenue. And I would strongly advocate that we, I mean, it's a little bit of the same thing, but bumping local revenue up above 60 million didn't seem realistic to me.
Dr. Minor?
So, Ms. Doolin, to clarify, you're at 58 million for local revenue. Is that what you were stating?
No, I'm at 60 for local revenue.
At 60, okay.
Yeah. I'm hoping that we can get to what the mayor wants. I just don't think that we can get beyond that. And even getting to 60 seems a little rosy. State revenue is the one that I adjusted up to an $800 increase, BSA equivalent.
Got that one.
Yeah. And we just heard that from legislators from both sides of the aisle, that getting to 800 was realistic, as well as potentially adding some targeted transportation funding.
Thank you.
Kind of a procedural question, Mr. Burgess. Does the board want me to now kind of wipe clean on the expenditure side? So going from one scenario to another, I could use some direction on what the board would prefer. So right now we have Miss Meredith's items on the expenditure side, and we just adjusted revenue. So what's the board's desire on how you want me to track these different scenarios?
Good question. I imagine if folks have different ideas that they've already worked through the tool, that they would probably want to start over. Board members.
Excuse me, Mrs. Burnett has her hand up.
Mrs. Burnett.
And Miss Maple as well.
Yes, thank you. Can you guys hear me?
I can.
Yes, we can.
Okay, excellent. Sorry, I can't speak too loud. Sorry that I'm out with pneumonia. So my intention with this, when I spoke with Dr. Meinert last week, was that we would everybody would work through a scenario for administration, because I know many of us have different ideas on what increases will come from where and what cuts we need to take out from where. Sorry, I'm having a hard time talking, but so if each board member could just work through a scenario, I think that would be the best way for administration to track, and then we could discuss it and go from there possibly. That was just kind of my thinking.
Great. That sounds great to me.
So I'm going to go and.
If I might,
We do have other folks in the
then
queue already.
let's go to those.
Mrs. Hardy,
It's okay. It was more to say that we should ask President Burnett.
thank you. Miss Maple.
I was just gonna say, I did the one that I just, that we just worked through, I did submit it online as well. So it does, the administration has a record of that idea submitted already as well.
Thank you. Mr. Doran.
I would suggest that we make sure we collect each person's ideas, because we can't tell from one to the other. But if we have an ongoing list, what people are putting out, it'll be some mix of that at the end.
So
Go ahead, Mr. DeGraw.
thank you, Mr. Burgess. To that point, we'll be taking notes on each scenario, and then we could even share that as a document with board members, and you can see exactly what each board member put forward in each of their scenarios.
Mrs. Hardy.
I guess what would be helpful is what's the intent of how we handle this on the day of the vote? Last time, we kind of worked through different scenarios and then voted. Is that the same plan this time? Some of us are going to have wildly different. I know mine is probably like nobody else is at this table. So is it helpful for me to walk people through that, or are we living in like reality versus what we'd like to see?
I mean, from this evening's conversation, I think it's helpful to see where each board member is at. And so if there's commonalities in certain areas, we know that that might be an area where there doesn't need to be as much information or debate. And then areas that are further apart, then that's where the conversation comes in, certainly tonight and then future work sessions.
Excuse me, Mrs. Burnett.
Ms. Burnett.
Thank you, Carm. Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Yes, so I agree. And thank you, Mrs. Hardy. So I appreciate those comments. My intention behind this was to, like Dr. Meinert was just saying, collect that data from each board member. It will show where there is support for certain things, and that will narrow our case. And then I'm hopeful that by the time we get to our decisions, that we can have this narrowed down to where there won't be too much heated debate around certain areas. That was where my intention lied.
Thank you. Can I go ahead and put myself in the queue just to mention that I would like us to capture scenarios that are both rosy and not so rosy, and as an opportunity to get get the information out to the public primarily. I would like to be enough to do without funding. Okay, so we've gone through a scenario and two scenarios now from board members.
I will illustrate, and I'm not sure if Ms. Julian had items on the expenditure side. I don't think she got to those, though.
Go ahead, Ms. Julian.
Okay. I'm going to start by saying that we have a tremendous opportunity to bring back students from correspondence programs to either, and that's been a big talking point, right? To either our best homeschool or, and I think that's the easier lift because those students are already in a correspondence program. So switching to a different correspondence program with our facilities is probably a lower hanging fruit in a sense than innovating on a level that adds a lottery that maybe only 200 kids can participate in. That changes the way that they are being educated right now, correspondence. And so with that in mind, I have talked to a lot of people who either, and this is anecdotal, of course, but I'm hoping that the district can do this at a broader level, maybe next year, that have chosen a out-of-district correspondence program or choose to go to charter school. And one of the primary reasons that I'm hearing is that there's more individualized attention. So there's individualized attention for their students. The class sizes are small. I think that when we are trying to gain people back into our district, and especially into neighborhood schools, and also not lose additional ones, if we are able to get our class sizes down to that more mirroring what a charter school is able to offer in our district, it not only will fulfill our mission in providing equitable education opportunities for all, but it also might stop the decline. So with that, I have not put together a totally balanced budget by way of the options that are on here. I have one that I'm going to add for consideration. On the revenue side, I have $60 million for local revenue, projected enrollment. I have held that at the proposed budget scenario. And the reason is because this year, when we had a significant decline, I'd rather not shoot ourselves in the foot with that one. This year, when we had a significant decline, we used about $4 million of our fund balance to cover expenditures within the year. If we maintain our fund balance and we're in that situation next year, we can draw on fund balance next year. But that's something that the board will have to really consider with the fund balance where it's at, which is is it about 10 million right now, 8 million?
It's at 13 and change.
But what's the available right now?
Yeah, that was a projected number. So that's that.
Yeah.
We're not all the way through the current year. So the anticipated was 8 to 10.
8 to 10. Okay. So I just want to state why I'm not changing that projected enrollment, because we proved this year that we used fund balance as our safety net there. The state revenues, I would like to increase that to a BSA equivalent of an $800 increase because of the conversations that we had in Juneau. Yes, that's Rosie. Right now, they're looking at a $1,000 increase. I don't think I didn't hear that in any office, but in every office that Mr. Burgess and I sat in, and Ms. Hull, everybody said they're gonna, they think that the appetite is there for at least a 600 increase, and then also specific targeted funding for transportation, primarily because Mat-Su is in a really tough spot right now. And Mat-Su has a lot of transportation needs with the amount of roads that they have. And federal aid didn't change at all. Okay, so this is what I did on elementary schools. I dropped PTR in elementary down to 25. I reduced 6 FTE library associates. In secondary school, I dropped 6 to 8 to 30 PTR. And in 9 through 12, I dropped PTR to 31. High school counselors I kept as the proposed budget. I closed Northstar College. I did not change activity funding. I did not change high school activity funding. Educational options and opportunities. I added, pardon me, a best satellite at Two Rivers as well as Midnight Sun. Charter schools, I made no changes. District administration, I kept the curriculum materials as proposed. The teacher laptop replacement payment, I reduced that to just a $350,000 payment. Staffing, I increased the cut to district administration to $700,000. And transportation, I decreased our subsidy because I'm anticipating an increase from the state on transportation to the tune of about 20%. I decreased our subsidy to 1.5 million. And then this is something that has come up. I would be open to a couple things here. So I'm at a $542,000 deficit. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So where I'd like to see that come from, and I'd like to have a conversation around this. It was emailed to us, and then I emailed Luke or Dr. Meinert, sorry, and asked for some clarification around this. Now, this would impact our overall kindergarten classes. But I asked the question of how much would it cost if we reduced our kindergarten aides from 1 aide in every kindergarten class to 1 aide split between classes. And of course, this is a reduction in services and also an increased burden on kindergarten teachers. So I'm saying that knowing this fully. But I'm doing this because I'm trying to get PTR for elementary instead of at 27.5 down to 25 in every classroom. Having, if we did that, it would be an $800,000 savings. And if we did that, if we were going to, then I would necessarily talk about, what would be, if we had that savings, would I cut every single thing on here? Probably not. But to the extent that we are able to lower PTR, I think that is the number one thing that we need to do to draw people back to our schools and also increase the level of academic offerings for all of our students. And that was my entire focus for this budget. How do we increase the academic outcomes for the most students possible versus funding specific things that don't necessarily serve many? Thank you.
And so sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. DeGraw.
Thanks. Just to finalize Ms. Doolin's scenario, the reduction of half of the kinder aides would generate about a $250,000 surplus on the tool. We just don't have the ability to reflect that on the screen, but about a $250,000 surplus.
Mrs. Hardy.
I guess we're walking people through what we're doing. So I left local revenue at 60 million. I did not change the projected enrollments, and I'll get to why later. For state revenue, I increased it to a $1,000 BSA increase. And, oh yeah,
Give me 2 shakes, Ms. Hardy.
there's a reset button at the bottom. Just scroll all the way to the bottom and hit reset all. Only thing I've changed so far from what we had proposed is the state is a $1,000 BSA increase. So a $1,000 BSA increase is part of HB 69. It actually, in that one, would be a little bit more, but it helps address the inflation, getting us back to, is it 2017 levels, right, for that one? So that's what it's based off of. And I will also point out that the Anchorage School Board is probably going to talk about a resolution that I think we should talk about passing, where if you give us funding, we can return our PTR back to levels when we were funded to be able to afford that PTR. Federal, you can't change, it stayed the same. Elementary schools lowered PTR to 25. Didn't touch library associates. Secondary schools, 6 to 8 went down to 28.
Say that last one more time, Ms. Hardy.
Elementary went to 25, and then 6 to 8 went to 28.
28. Okay.
And 9 to 12 went to 31. I didn't touch high school counselors, Northstar College, or increase any of the funding. So everything else there remains from the proposed budget. I didn't touch anything in district-wide, although I likely could have with my balance. So actually, let's check district-wide, fixing our supply budgets that we did last year. Educational options, I did a best satellite at both Two Rivers and Midnight Sun. Charter schools, 680 BSA equivalent, and I was wondering though it would be higher if we do get 1,000, and there wasn't a way to capture that and what that would be.
To that point, the revenue generation has that taken into consideration. So we baked that into the cake.
Thank you so much for doing that. So then charter schools, the addition of 1 large charter school. I don't think I made additional cuts to district administration. It should say 0. Yep, no additional cuts to district administration. And then I zeroed out our transportation subsidy. And we have a slight surplus, and I will tell you, zeroing out the transportation subsidy, 1, because a piece of the governor's proposed budget is transportation. He's acknowledged and said it's something that needs to happen. 20% is not even close to what we need. I think it's an area that we can argue needs to happen. He also is a charter school advocate, and part of being able to provide transportation and make charter schools equitable is increasing that funding. I would love to see added in suggestions to even have some way to capture if the transportation passed by the legislature wasn't a 20% increase, was like a 30 or 40 or 50. What would that look like? What could we provide? Could we provide a busing to our schools of choice if given that amount of funding, so that we can talk to them and be like, nope, this is what we want to do, and if this is the educational landscape you want to build, this is what's required to build it. And then the other piece is if it doesn't come through, we get told all the time that we need to live within our means. And our means are a transportation program that does not fully cover what our students need. And so that is a reason for people to advocate. Busing, is something that we would love to provide, but we need to be funded to provide it. Other than that, our money should go to our classrooms. Our money should go to PTR. And that's where I'm going to put it.
Okay, okay. Ms. Carol Hubbard.
Sorry, I'm sort of doing this all again. I think I did probably, I don't know, 8 or 10 of these over the weekend, just trying to get my brain wrapped around all this. So are we ready? Okay. Local revenue, 60. Projected enrollment, I decreased it, minus 950. The state revenue, I did, actually, I just changed that to 800 BSA after listening to everybody. I have had it 680 the entire time, and so I guess there's a little hope there. Moving to the other side. Elementary, PTR 25. Reduce the library associates. Secondary. I have, hold on one second, sorry. 6 through 8, 29. 9 through 12, 32. Reduction of the counselors. Reduction of Northstar College.
Just to clarify, Ms. Loa Hubbard, there's just an add back of, so reduction meaning
Sorry.
maintain proposed?
Maintain
Yes,
proposed.
gotcha. Thank
Yep,
you.
Sorry. Okay, and then I'm down to middle school funding and high school funding, leave as proposed. District-wide, I added the 70,000. Both best satellites. District admin, minus 7. Sorry. Going back up to the laptops, the teacher laptop, I moved that to the second option, which is 350. And then the curriculum materials, I just did half, I went down half of the proposed, so down to 270. And then transportation, minus 1.5 million. So I'm at a deficit still of 27,000. I don't know. I'll get the guitar and go on the corner and put out a can. I don't know.
I use the term hand grenades and horseshoes
There you go.
sometimes, so.
But this is a whole different one than I did before, so.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to Ms. Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Mr. DeGraw, when you are ready. And I can't see my screen when I move over here, so I'm just going to be in the balancing act. But let's see here. In mine, I assumed the 60 million from the borough. And I'm hopeful that the borough
Ms. Burnett, apologies. We're getting a request for a brief recess from admin.
Oh, okay.
So we'll be back in 5 minutes.
No worries.
And resume. Back to you, Miss Burnett.
All right, thank you. So we will go over to the revenue. So I did assume the 60 million. So I did two of these. I do have one that's way worse, but we'll do this one for right now and I'll come back later. So I did assume the 60, but then everything else I left the same. No increase in BSA, no extra loss of enrollment. So we'll go over to the spending side. In the elementary, I adjusted the PTR to 25. I did reduce the elementary library by the 6 FTE. Then when going into secondary, I have the 6 to 8 at 30 instead of 30.5. With 9 through 12, I left as is at the 33.5. I reduced the 2.5 in high school counselors. I left Northstar College alone, so we're leaving that. We're leaving Northstar College there. I did not reduce any activity funding. District-wide, I did not add in anything there. I did add the two best satellites. So the one for Two Rivers, the one for Midnight Sun. I left the charter school equivalent funding at 340. And then in a district administration, I went to, give me a second here. I left the curriculum materials proposed budget for now. In information and technology, I reduced the laptop fund to 350. So reduced it by the 300,000. In district administration, I left that at 500K. For transportation, I tapped that out. And that left with a $3,000 surplus in the account.
That's what we show.
And that's mine. No real big explanations. I'm short breath tonight, but I have a worse one that I'll walk through a little later.
Mrs. Hardy?
It's a question about how the tool works. So in state revenue, we're changing what I'm assuming is inside the BSA. Like, so if I click 1,000, that's equivalent to an inside the BSA increase. But over on charter schools, when we're reducing it, how do those two things play together? Because if we get $1,000 inside the BSA, the 680 equivalent for a charter doesn't matter anymore because it's a BSA increase on the other side.
So the state revenue adjustment is assuming full charter revenue of that BSA. Is your question, does that impact the expenditure side and the adjustments that we've made?
So like in my own example, I both did a $1,000 BSA increase, but I also did the charter school equivalent of a 680 BSA.
Yeah.
But is that necessary, or is there more of a surplus in mine because inside the BSA takes care of it?
Yeah, if we take another break, Ms. Nielsen and I will talk about that and get an answer for you. No, it's all right. It's a good question.
Want to take that break right now? Or
Yeah, if you'd like, we can.
yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
Okay.
How long do you need?
5 minutes.
Okay, 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Be back at 6:46. Mr. DeGraw?
Yeah, so we'll have the answer to Ms. Hardy's question tomorrow and provide that to the board.
Thank you. It looks like next in the queue is Miss Maple.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to thank you. I just wanted to say that I am supportive of the two proposals that we saw, the changing from the borough increase and reworking to get a similar balance by doing the increase to the BSA and adjusting the transportation subsidy. That differing from my initial proposal, I do agree with those that propose that that's probably a safer way to move forward. So I just wanted to voice my support for those that shared that. That's it.
Thank you. Ms. Julian.
Ms. Maple, if you can hear me, I just have a clarifying question. When you're talking about the BSA adjustment, are you talking about a 680 or an 800 increase?
Yours had a 680. No, I'm sorry,
No,
it had the
800.
800. I and then required I'm supportive of a combination of state revenue increase, whether that's 800 or 1,000. I really like that Anchorage put theirs forward saying this is what we are able to do. Now let us do it. Or an 800 with some combination thereof. I'm basically just trying to say I am receptive to not increasing the borough ask and instead relying on other increases or decreases in subsidies to get to a similar budget as what I put forward.
I'd like to ask a clarifying question of admin, and if it's something that you have to answer tomorrow, that's fine. But when we are looking at adjusting local revenue, we've talked about how an increase in the local contribution could result in an increase, an additional increase from the state. Is that captured here or not?
So that isn't. I just haven't been able to get that far in my calculations. So I can continue to work on that. And yeah, I mean, we're talking maybe $100,000 here, which I mean, could end up being a big deal, but it's certainly not the impact that we'll look at that would be, in the $500,000 range if there's potential additional savings on the charter side. So.
Okay, thank you. Who's next? Mrs. Hardy.
I'll just offer it up. I sent an email. Can we also add the balancing act? Not tonight, it's fine. The ability to increase special education funding to be able to have a IR and ER at each of our elementaries like was in the proposed budget. I'm assuming that's no longer a possibility after our vote. So what would that cost to do it? I know Ms. Hall had said it was around $250,000 per program.
Yeah, we can take a look at that. Ms. Hall is working with a small working group to look at models. And so depending on kind of the direction they go and what they're building, we would base it on top of that. So I'll connect back with her and we can get that added into the tool for the board.
Mr. Doran.
I think it's just you and I left to do our balancing act. And I'm not doing the balancing act. You can play with it as you want at this moment. Coming in tonight, and we've already touched upon some of it, is because we face a dilemma. And from all appearances, that I think we do need to factor into our budget, probably at least 2 charter schools. That the state will make the decision whether we take action or not. And there's been an email from the commissioner that indicates that she is fully supportive of that. We know the current state administration is supportive of that. And so in some ways, we're kind of in the crosshairs. And so we have to factor that in. So I'm glad to see it on the balancing act. And has been part of our conversation. Um, I also was looking at this in terms of opportunity is knocking for us. We can either go into continue in retrenchment of public education, or we can take control of the narrative. The narrative has been that we're not doing our job, we're not being creative or innovative, et cetera, from the naysayers. And we see that our community is ready to be creative and innovative and to support, I think, us as a district. And if we can change that narrative to from, we being told, do something and then we'll fund you, to we are doing something, now fund us. And so that's part of the approach I looked at in terms of this. When I look at the pieces of the balancing act on the revenue side, that I think my rosy picture is 60 from the borough. It is an increase. 680 to get at least what we got last year is the rosy side of that. It does seem to me that we might need to add a piece of transportation, as conversation is, that is not in the BSA, and the state revenue side here is just referencing the BSA. But that transportation should be, I would suggest, would be helpful to have what it is currently, and then maybe with some increase there. Then on the expenditure sides, I started going through, my thing is creating a pot of money. And where can we create a pot of money and then see where it goes and such. So at this stage in the game, I've left basically the proposed budget, not adding anything to that, but where I would look at and suggest that we look at some things. One of the tops is within custodial services. There are 3 custodial supervisors, and we have cut, I'm suggesting that 2 of those be cut because we only have a quarter of the custodians who are predominantly in schools during the school day and are actually supervised by, on a practical basis, are supervised by the principal. So we don't, if the company is able to do the job, they can supervise their staff. So that's one piece of moving into a pot. Star of the North, I would suggest closing or dramatically relooking at in terms of who it's serving, how it's serving. No, Star of the North, the program at North Pole right now. It has changed dramatically, and I sort of have questions. I'm just putting things on, and I'm happy to be informed otherwise to do that. But with BEST, I would suggest a reduction in the teachers to my best understanding has, I'm sorry, the pun is there. My understanding about BEST is that right now it's staffed at 135 student load per teacher, which is well below that of secondary teachers who have between 150 and 180 students with and those teachers, secondary teachers, are doing prep, teaching, and the evaluation pieces, which ostensibly are being done by the parents. So I would broaden that out. My number I pulled from Governor Dunleavy, who suggested 250 is the appropriate correspondence ratio. So I believe that's 3 positions there. Laptops, love to get them, but I I zeroed that out. Transportation subsidy, I zeroed out. Kind of along those lines that others have said that we'll use the money we're given and we'll stretch it as far as we can. Curriculum, I actually zeroed out the any new materials. I have a concern, a question within that, how much is supplies? Typically, once something's been adopted, anything that needs to be replaced is done by the schools covered in their supply budget, and I don't know to what extent that has changed, so I'm open for, we'll need more information as we go along. District administration, actually, I had $1 million. I'm assuming that includes my thought on custodial supervision. Is that under that umbrella? Nordell, I have on that. Currently, we have Midnight Sun closure. What would go in there, the talk was, well, we'll put, and is on here, putting a satellite there. Well, why don't we just move it all together? If we're going to do that. I question the cost of one building or another, and Midnight Sun could come forward with a charter if, given where we are right now, unless we come up with some other models of a neighborhood school in some fashion. My other thought that's related to Nordell is if we make it available, if we need the seat space, but not as much as LAD has, that LAD could move into that building and just be relocated and smaller footprint. Again, what's that cost savings? I don't know. It's there. The magnet schools, Hutch, there are some plannings, and maybe we might have to move that up faster. I'm concerned, as others have been, that the upperclassmen numbers take a significant drop, whether that's attrition or how many are going to Northstar College or going back to the neighborhood high schools. I don't know, but we may need to do that model faster, and what that means. While on Hutch, just as a reference, when I was looking through the Northstar College sheet, and I know there's been conversations about increasing access to CTE classes. If they're college classes, we have to pay college tuition for them, but we have many of those classes already. We're not paying out more money, more college tuition. Relative to Northstar College, I left it. It's a revenue loss, and I don't think we can afford to lose. I do appreciate the streamlining of staffing. Maybe there can be a little bit of look there, but generally at this point, I left it. I am continue to be concerned if there was ripple effects on other on other schools, and if students are. I think we've well, anyway, that's just in the conversation. LAD, I was mentioning in terms of either, I had down here that we no longer do the 6-8. We can't afford it. Numbers going down with students, post-based students going to Arctic Light. LAD may not need as big a place. And so that's there. Activities, anywhere to cutting it in half to cutting it completely. there are some drastic pieces in here. There's no doubt about it. Then there are other bits and pieces, but those are some of the highlights that I have. But I'm looking at how do we build a pool. I'd love to reduce PTR. I don't see us getting there unless we get more money. And there may be other things to go back to. The last thing, as I looked at it, that was my rosy picture of revenue. My other side is 5960. No increase to the BSA, no one-time funding. I think it can be a reality. And as I said, if we have to factor in 2 or 3 charter schools, that'll have a broad impact. And then, in essence, I have some ideas of our bare bones, but how do we survive the core values that we want in public education in our district and be ready to rebuild when the time comes? If we completely continue to retrench, do we lose that core upon which to build? And so, I'd go back to each school and say, really, if you put everybody in the regular classroom, maybe prep times go at the end of the day, and maybe we release early. We have extra hours. I'm going way over on a very bare bones deal. It could be a reality. We don't have the override, and we know that the governor has not, in the entire time he's been governor, he has never put out a figure to the BSA. He has always said, legislature, do it, and he has backed off each time. So that's why I'm comfortable being rosy. 680, 60, transportation. Then from there on, when we go to but I'm glad we're talking about, we need to have the conversation about the bare bones at some point. So I appreciate that.
Mrs. Hardy.
More questions and kind of things to add. Do we know what other correspondence programs staff their programs at?
The general staffing level of other correspondence programs is in the 125 to 150 range, and so going up to 250 certainly would put us at a competitive disadvantage compared to other correspondence programs, but generally 125 to 150, and I believe ours this year was built on 150, did have a slight enrollment drop that brought the PTR down for those teachers.
Okay. Can I ask other ones, or? Okay.
Go ahead, Ms. Hardy.
Did we ever find out what the cost or feasibility is of offering to buy out the fund balances of people who moved from like Raven to Best?
Not yet.
That would be maybe nice to add in there too, as a way to draw more out of district people, but factoring in that, I assume some people might have like $10,000 or significant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's why we would want to factor that in before we offer it. And then the other request was, can we add the cost for Salcha's reduced model, having it funded at what it is they would bring in through the BSA? So kind of like as if they were a charter, as that be their reduced model, what would that look like? So we have a way to capture if we did that.
And that request is put that in balancing act for Two Rivers. Okay.
For Salcha, because we closed Two Rivers.
For Salcha, yes, sir.
Ms. Carol Hubbard.
Thank you. So is this a good time to just comment? Okay. So I had a conversation with a school board member down in Delta. And we were talking about Northstar College, and they have an in-house program where they offer dual enrollment with UAF, and they teach it in-house, and they get their teachers certified with UAF, and then UAF approves the curriculum, and it costs them For 100 students, they pay $60,000. So for 200 students, it would be $120,000 total. And they're getting their dual enrollment. She said there might be some sort of subsidy because they're a rural school, but it's certainly a huge difference between 1.5 million and 120,000. So that's just one comment.
So I'll start with the 1.5 million comment. So you wouldn't realize $1.5 million in savings if you close Northstar College. And we also offer a tremendous amount of dual enrollment options and opportunities for our high school students. And so Northstar College is an opportunity on top of that. But for our students that reside at our neighborhood high schools, they also have dual enrollment options along with AP courses. And I'll let Ms. Gillum talk a little bit more about that.
I'm going to look behind me because I think, are those Alaska Advantage classes? I'm phoning a friend. Miss Amy Brister is sitting behind us, who is the dual enrollment coordinator for UAF, and I know she works closely with Delta. And so I'm just wondering, are those Alaska Advantage classes they take in Delta?
So
Or
Delta does a combination of much of what the school district, Fairbanks School District, also does. So what you're referencing is a course that was approved for a high school teacher to teach the equivalent, and we call that a sponsored, co-sponsored class. So the students pay, or sometimes it's a school district pays, $100 per credit. And we have lots of those things happening within the schools here. Currently, we have Lathrop, West Valley, Hutchison,
okay.
North Pole.
Yes,
Yep.
okay. So yes, so we do, I just was gonna make sure I was referencing the correct thing. And then they do it at Delta does, okay. So two different things. So that one program has both teacher-sponsored classes. So we have, as Ms. Brister just said, classes throughout the district that are dual enrollment classes that are teacher-sponsored by our teachers. And those cover also, as Mr. Doran was saying, our CTE classes as well. So it's both core academic curriculum and then some elective classes as well. Then there's also Alaska Advantage, which is an online platform that's offered that our students, both in Northstar College and in the district, can take advantage of as well, that are online learning classes offered that students can take for dual enrollment credit. Benefits of Northstar College, of course, are that it's the whole college experience. So you're not just limited to a specific subset of classes, that you have, not the entire academic curriculum of UAF, but you're able to enroll in a diverse set of classes up there. I also, in the one pager, mentioned that the Rising Honors College program, or Rising Honors program, is also available to students. So we've had students participate in that as well. And then they're also able to join activities at UAF, participate in those as well as back at their attendance area homeschool, so they can do activities at their attendance area school as well. Did I cover all the questions that were maybe in that question?
Follow up, Ms. Carol Hubbard.
Thank you. So you said diverse course availability. So how many teachers then does it require for Northstar College?
0 school district teachers. It's all UAF faculty.
So if the kids are okay, so I haven't been up there, so I've just been told they're in the Bunnell building and they don't mingle with other college students. Is that correct?
No, that is not correct.
So if they're in the Bunnell building, then all of the professors at UAF then come to them?
No. So they have a space in the Bunnell building. So the director, Miss Kennedy, and their counselor have a space there, and then they have a UAF staff advisor who works with them, and then they have a program secretary. So they have a space where our district staff are located in the Bunnell building, and they have some cohorted classes. So there are some cohorted classes where Northstar College students will just be Northstar College students in that class, but the majority of their classes are UAF classes taught by UAF professors with other UAF students.
Oh, okay, so that was a complete misunderstanding from what I was told. It's a totally different thing. So the majority, okay, just so I'm understanding, the majority of the classes that they take are UAF classes taught by UAF professors with other other college students who could be 18 to 25 30,
Yeah.
40, 50,
95.
95, thank
Yeah.
you, 95. Okay, so they're actually in real college classes.
Yep. They can graduate with an associate's degree, and I think we had some data points in there of, have gone on to get other degrees as well.
And the age of our students is how old?
Well, it's juniors and seniors, so 16 to 18.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to jump in real quick and ask that we add an option for Northstar College for an enrollment freeze rather than closing it altogether. Mrs. Hardy.
It's going to be funny after what you just said.
Can I ask a quick clarification? So when you say enrollment freeze, what do you mean by that?
Thank you. That meaning that we would look at not accepting new students this year, but allow students who have juniors who have begun the program to complete their education at Northstar College.
Okay. And the only reason I wanted to clarify is now that Northstar College is a recognized school by the Department of Education, we have a minimum number of students being, we need 175 for it to count under that small school model and generate the revenue for those students. So if we froze enrollment, I'm not sure how that would work out financially, but it would be
a financial hit to the district on the revenue side. The multiplier would drop, and I don't have the number offhand, I could calculate it, but it would be significant.
Mrs. Hardy.
So, because I've been living in this world, I have the school size table, and my proposal was that we increase enrollment at Northstar College. So, and if this is still accurate, I'm assuming it is, it did come from a different district. It's 150 to 249, I think, is the size factor we're living in. So we could go as low as 150 and still remain in our bubble, and as high as 249 and still remain at that factor. We're at 187. So allowing them to enroll some more students. We've received a robust amount of student emails, all of them strongly in favor, parent emails, all of them strongly in favor, saying this is one of those things that we have done right, that is good. And I will fully admit that before I got on this board, I came up and gave a testimony. You were sitting over there, Dr. Miner, and I was like, what are we doing? I don't like Northstar College. And I will eat all the crow. I'm good at eating it. It's a good program. It's something I would have appreciated when I was in school. I took a lot of AP classes. There were a lot more of them offered back then. But had I, given the income and background I came from, had the ability to get no cost actual college credits that become real college credits, not AP credits that sometimes people accept, that would have saved me so much student loan debt. And that is a gift we can give our students. And I do think we could do a more robust effort in getting more people. I would love finding ways to break the transportation barrier to allow that. But it makes a lot of sense. And this is a program that's across the nation. These are happening everywhere. Matsu has them, Anchorage has them. We should not be cutting off things that are working, that parents love, just because. And I will say, I loved my high school experience. I loved being in that little school. I loved West Valley and my sports and all of that, but that is not the world that our kids are living in anymore. And my nostalgia shouldn't be the thing that holds students to a high school building when the world is different and middle colleges are a thing. So yeah, I would like to see it, what it would mean, because it does cost us a little bit more. I know it's not linear. The closer you get to the level, you actually are getting less funding per student. But, could we allow more students? I know we were under enrollment this year. We didn't quite hit the 280 or 187. But to say anybody that wants this program could go there, and how could we make that happen?
Okay, I have Miss Julian, Mr. Doran, then Miss Maple, then Miss Burnett.
I was just going to say, Mr. Burgess, you have not yet shared a scenario. So would it be fair to have you share a scenario right now, or is that
But I'm fine.
Okay, I'll reiterate a couple things that I'm in support of. Going back to what President Burnett asked us to do a little bit tonight, I would like to explore a K-5 model at LAD and see what those costs are that we would potentially save. Let me see here. Enrollment, let me see here. Extended, I'd like to see a couple things on the increase side. So in investment side, one thing that we haven't talked about a lot, but it really resonates with me from a conversation I had with a parent at Midnight Sun. And that parent said, and this goes back to, again, I think that I'm probably on a polar opposite of somebody who wants to kind of compartmentalize. I want to strengthen our neighborhood schools so that people don't feel like to get a good education, they need to be in a school of choice. Going back to what Mr. Doran talked about, I want people to feel like it's not like they're not getting a second class education if they didn't get in on a lottery. I want there to be schools of choice. I also want to follow the Alaska statute and the laws around the timelines for that. And it's not that we're saying no, that I'm saying no to a school of choice right now. I'm just saying, let's look at our house is on fire and let's figure out how we can potentially strengthen our neighborhood schools so that more kids don't and more families don't feel like, oh, I didn't get to go to that special school of choice. And that's one of the reasons that I'm advocating for, we'll continue to advocate for potentially looking at Northstar College as one of those things that are we really serving students in a fair and equitable way and giving them everything that they could, especially now knowing that they could still get dual enrollment. And so when I look at the numbers and I see $1 million going to UAF, we are paying UAF and giving them a boost of about 200 students or 180 students. And that absolutely benefits them. And I have a little viewpoint into that based on my employment. But that's not necessarily our mission. Our mission is to serve students. And if we could still serve students with dual enrollment, with giving them the opportunity to get college credit but still remain in high school, that's something that I would be more in favor of, because if we can serve more students doing that and get kids through transportation funds to that high school, if we can also innovate career and technical education, thank you, Mr. Dorn, for bringing that up. I'd like to look at innovating at Hutch. I don't think it's a savings, but I'd like to see if we could potentially fast track that, because to the extent that we're able to develop more career pathways that get our students what they need so that they have options, more kids with more options is what my goal is when I'm looking at this. Not only options and good education for those that have the ability. And in a world where, as Mrs. Hardy talks about, where we could potentially provide transportation to everywhere, that's a world that we're not living in right now. I'd like to see extended learning program coming back and investments back into the extended learning program. The reason for that is because the amount of students that program impacts and how we have balanced the budget on that program in the past, seeing an investment on that side is something that I'd like to at least see on the balancing act. What would that look like? How much would that cost? And then there's another thing that we've talked about quite a bit, but it's not on this balancing act. And again, it's for illustration purposes as well. But that's to bring, what if we were to bring back band and orchestra, string instruments, music at elementary? And again, the whole purpose of this is to provide a quality education and bolster the schools so that, again, students don't have to feel like they need to be in a school of choice or in a special program to get the quality education. But I still support schools of choice because I think that it's important that there's different educational models out there for students.
Mr. Dorn.
Okay, I'm going to suggest that you get in the queue and then we have everything on the table before we start getting into details. And then if you would, right behind you. So you go and then I'll go.
I appreciate that. My scenario was actually very similar to the one that was presented initially by Ms. Maple. So I don't have a whole lot of value to add by going through the balancing act myself at this point. So please, Mr. Dorn.
Okay, I hope you will share what is dissimilar as we go. All right, so a couple of things I wanted to come back to on the revenue side. I'd like to see the option of increasing our current enrollment by 200. I think that again when do we start? If you want marketing our district, putting out what we have, creating things that I think what's significant about Two Rivers and Pearl Creek, because they've actively been involved in doing this, trying to reach out and draw people in. Two Rivers providing an opportunity, encouragement for preschoolers to come and have a little bit of time in school, just to get them in, drawing families into the program and other things they're doing. Pearl Creek community reaching out to non-district enrolled families and trying to get an avenue of interest. Would this interest you? So I think looking at how do we do that instead of just looking, and because we've had the conversation about quite seriously with the different schools and different models, who are we going to lose? So that's going to, so I'd like to see if we became proactive rather than reactive on it. On Midnight Sun, just one of the things, again, a scenario, if we closed Nordell, kept Midnight Sun, and put the best program in Midnight Sun, they could have a sole entry wing, and it's kind of getting part of our idea of satellite, trying to get out a little bit further than just city center. So what that might look like. With Barnett, I would put them at the same elementary PTR as the other schools, unless I'm wrong when I ran the numbers. It appears to be lower. So again, if you would look at that and stuff. And I know we'll have a lot of deeper discussions on some of the different topics we've talked about, but getting them on the table, I appreciate tonight.
Ms. Gillum, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. I apologize. I know you guys are having your discussion, so I certainly don't want to intrude on that. I just wanted to speak a little bit to what Ms. Julian said regarding Northstar College, and then also maybe talk a little bit about what Mr. Dorn was talking about. So I of course will advocate for Northstar College. I did create both those one-pagers for you, so certainly if you have any questions, I just want to think about in terms of options that we have for our secondary students, in terms of how we do look to ways that we can innovate for secondary students, since there are, fewer schools of choice at secondary. Certainly we've talked a lot about Hutchison, and what Ms. Hardy just said regarding increasing enrollment. We have talked about how could we look at ways to even increase our community partnership with UAF. I think that Northstar College is a great example of how we've developed partnerships in our community. We've looked at in the UAF has certainly looked at too, that it supports their ability to keep students here as well. So we have started to look at in terms of, okay, let me think my thoughts here. How could we look at ways to build stronger CTE pathways in coordination with UAF and CTC? So when we think of how could we look at increasing enrollment for Northstar College, what Ms. Hardy was speaking to, CTE and CTC is one way that we could certainly look at doing that in terms of both the dual enrollment piece that Ms. Carol Hubbard spoke to. So how could we have, sponsored classes by our instructors that could earn dual enrollment, but then also more closely align. We've been working with UAF and CTC to look at how could we more closely align the pathways that we offer with the pathways that they offer, if that makes sense.
And to add on to that, so it wouldn't be duplicative courses. It would be you've gone through your high school pathway and you've maxed out in terms of the certification opportunities we have in high school. And now, because of the partnership, you can continue down the line and earn more advanced courses or more advanced options through CTC.
All right, I'm gonna, since there's discussion around Northstar College, I'm gonna put the queue aside for a second and let members respond or ask questions of administration. Ms. Doolian, go ahead.
Thank you. And I just want to say that UAF's ability to keep students here or enroll them in UAF is not our mission. And it is not our goal that our students just go to UAF. It is our goal that they thrive and they have options. And I know a lot of those students, and after talking to some of the those that look at data overall for UA system, there is not necessarily that turnover rate, but nor should it be a consideration for us. So I'd like to just be that is not, I don't think that that's appropriate for us to have that as a consideration for that program. If we are able, now Mr. Doran talked about the trickle effect. And one of the things when I was running for office, I ran into quite a few students, and again, this is anecdotal, so I don't know necessarily how you'd capture this, but I ran into quite a few students who didn't want to give up. And so it's not necessarily a nostalgia, but it's a fact that some don't necessarily want to give up what they have in high school and then go to a university setting at age 16, age 17. Some students that stayed behind, at least what I heard from, and I had a great conversation with a student at Lathrop that said, there aren't enough students that would be participating in the AP courses. There's not enough variety of options anymore because those students have been siphoned off. And that's what I hear quite a bit. I hear that from parents as well. We have received a tremendous amount of testimony. And why wouldn't we? Because we're paying students, we're paying the University of Alaska to give students college credit. In a time when we are potentially increasing PTR in elementary to 27.5 and increasing PTR across the board for all other grade levels, I do not understand why we would then say, let's hold this harmless, when if we can still offer educational opportunities that allow our secondary students to thrive, to get dual enrollment credit, I don't understand why we would do that. So that's one of the reasons that I like that we're talking about this. And of course, there's 7 members, and everybody has a different opinion. And I think that that's what makes this board so strong. However, I really question if we can still offer students an opportunity to gain college credit to partner with UAF. I don't necessarily know why we would maintain this if we could serve more students by folding it back into school. And then, of course, the other thing for me is a safety thing. A 16 and 17-year-old child on a university campus is a real thing. And I think I can just say that I don't necessarily believe that guardrails are in place all the time to make sure that those students are safe.
Okay, I do want to remind members to keep comments brief, and we will have time for further discussion on these specifics, I believe, in future work sessions. So let's, for the purposes of getting through tonight, keep debate to a minimum for now. Dr. Minor.
Sure. I'm going to keep this really brief. I just want to be careful about saying that we would offer a similar experience for our high school students duly enrolled at our high schools than what they're having now at Northstar College. I think they're both very different opportunities. If we close Northstar College, there's no way we're going to offer the same level of number of courses, types of courses for our students at our local high schools because of the limiting factor of the faculty that we have available to teach those classes. I also want the board to recognize that before Northstar College was a thing, minors were up on campus all the time. And so parents do opt in, they sign UAF paperwork, they understand the risks of their students participating in Northstar College. Or conversely, before Northstar College existed. The beautiful thing about Northstar College, though, is it is a supportive environment. And so we do have faculty up on campus that regularly checks in with our students. The university has done a beautiful job putting guardrails around our students and supporting them if there are disciplinary issues up on campus, which some of that certainly would go away with Northstar College being closed. We wouldn't have those same level of protections, I think, for our students and the same levels of communications we currently have. And so could it be done in terms of still offering some dual enrollment courses or maybe a few more additional dual enrollment courses for students at our high schools? Yes, but it certainly wouldn't be at the level that Northstar College is at now for our students.
Thank you, Dr.
Excuse
Minor.
me, Ms. Maple,
Yep.
and then Mrs. Burnett.
I was going to go ahead and go to Miss Burnett.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I would like to chime in first, Carm. I'm sorry, Miss Maple. But first, administration tonight has been tasked to only add things to the balancing act that have support for board members. They want to be able to add things and get things narrowed down for us so that we may effectively do this and make some decisions in the upcoming meetings that we have. I truly think this is a fantastic conversation, but we have tons of room for it here at later meetings. And I do feel we're getting a little off track with how administration should proceed. So I just want to remind board members that if you would like to put support behind something, it is important that you do so that administration is cued in that they are to add that. And with that, I just want to say that I do strongly support Mrs. Hardy's comments with Northstar College, and that I agree that we should look at an increase in enrollment. I think that would be a valuable thing for the district, especially when we are being accused of not being innovative or when we are accused of trying to take things away from our students. I don't feel that canceling a program would serve us any good when Northstar College serves a really great purpose. So thank you, Mrs. Hardy, for that suggestion, and I want to throw support behind that.
Okay, Ms. Maple.
Thanks. I will go through, I will not say all the things I was gonna say, but I will focus in on the stuff that does what Miss Burnett just suggested and where I'm adding support to something that's already come up to indicate to the administration that another person would like to see it. I wanted to start by saying, though, that in looking at, thank you for including our strategic plan, the draft of where we are right now with it. And I wanted to, in looking at that, pillar 2 is supporting access and choice. And I won't read it all. You guys can look at it. I'm sure most of you have, if not all of you. But I wanted to point out that it says what we will, which was the last meeting, the last strategic planning meeting we had. We focused, all of our groups focused on what we will do, these initiatives we'll put forward. And for the record, I'm not in pillar 2. This was not my group. But I wanted to point out that they talked about we will free up resources and build capacity of our staff, and we will explore magnets and focus school opportunities for neighborhood schools. And I bring that up because I hear what we came out of these broader conversations with, that the goal is not to grow our footprint, it's not to add new schools, it is to build capacity of our teachers, it is to invest in our neighborhood schools. So with that said, I too, like Mr. like Ms. Hardy, have from the beginning, had a lot of questions about Northstar College. It has been something that I have gone back and forth on over and over again. But I do find myself now, when we're talking about wanting to support access and choice, like what Ms. Burnett just said, I do find myself in a place where, it is a school that already exists. There's not significant cost savings in closing it, and investing in it to grow options does make sense to me too. So I would like to see those options. I would like to see that discussion of Northstar College. Sorry, flipping through my papers. Sorry. I wanted to the additional cuts to admin. I just want to give the reminder that it feels painless to cut admin. It feels a lot easier than a lot of the other cuts, but it is not. That those cuts hurt our kids in our classrooms too. It's just not the most obvious ways. On Northstar College, sorry, my papers are out of order, so I'm talking out of order, but I am interested in, one of the things that I've heard a lot about is what impact Northstar College has had on AP offerings at other schools. So I don't know if anybody else is interested in it, but I would like to see how we could reinvest in those so that it doesn't have to mean we cut off one thing, but can we make sure that another thing is not suffering? To be determined if anybody agrees with that. And then I think I'm seconding something that Mr. Doran alluded to earlier, which is, can we look at any potential reductions on the non-rep side of FMD, because we're going from 99 to 25 custodians. So if that is what I was picking up, I agree with Mr. Doran and would like to see that reflected. I wanted to ask again, in case somebody else also wants the information, if Miss Beam had any ideas for investing in BEST as opposed to just adding those BEST.
It appears that we've lost our Zoom connection.
I am still here.
Oh, okay, we're back.
What was the last thing I said? Sorry, I was rattling through things.
You had just mentioned Miss Beam investing in BEST.
Oh, okay. I didn't get very far after I went away. Yeah, I was interested in if anybody else wanted to hear about that. A different line item of an investment, not just adding the satellite schools, but actually investing back in to the program to recruit more students. And just two more. Not sure if anybody has interest other than me, but the HRIS system, that if we had money would be something that would benefit our whole district if we had an updated system. I'm interested in what the cost of that would be. While that probably isn't anything until we would talk about add backs if we had increased funding, it strikes me as something that is really important. So I'd at least love to have a number if anybody else agrees. And my last one is, sorry. In talking about Hutch and talking about Northstar, looking at where we've had these losses, I'm curious if the conversation, and maybe it's actually just a conversation for next year, but I'm curious if the conversation about Hutch returning to being more of a traditional voc tech school, if there's cost savings associated with that, or if it's actually cost increase. And I think that that's all I have. While I have the floor, I just want to let everybody know that I am probably going to log off of here in 20 minutes and I will listen to everything in the morning, but it is almost midnight and I have a meeting with our congressman in the morning and I would like to go to bed before I do that. So thank you all. And I will make sure I listen to everything I miss bright and early tomorrow morning.
Thank you, Ms. Maple. Next, I have Mr. Doran.
Okay, couple of things. One, in terms of Northstar College, I want to note that it is already projected to grow by 35, so from 180 to 215 given the paper that we were offered. As with anything, you know, I look at Northstar College, they are leaving high school and they're going to college. It has always concerned me in terms of ripple effects back to our neighborhood high schools. And I would hope that as a school, Northstar College takes on more of the activities and all of those things that a school would take on rather than kids going cross schools and schools having to pick up, neighborhood schools picking that up. But I do want to address, since the safety question was brought up, I think the kids in Northstar College are safe. And I think we need to make sure that we're clear on that. I have been impressed both from the university side and from the Northstar College side, the district side of it. The work to help kids make that transition, and that's one of the nice supports that's there for them. But the work they've done, and I've experienced that from within the system as well, that over the last several years, the consciousness of having minors on campus, there have always been minors on campus. We have had students going up there full time but not under, they basically just went. And we have not had issues with that. But the consciousness of the university to minors, not just from Northstar College, but across the board. They've run camps for elementary on up, and the trainings have changed that every person, even volunteers on the campus, have to go through. So I want to really reinforce that it is safe, it's a good, things are there. I do know parents who said, my kid isn't ready to go to college yet, and they've made that choice. And others said, yep, you're gonna have to grow up, but I'll be there as a parent and the things that are there. So I wanted to address that. I would hope that we can come back to the military enrollment conversation. We have had put on the table finally that, yes, there are 240 additional staff coming to Eielson. We don't know, and they cannot figure out, there's no way they can say how many dependents, how many kids, school-age kids. The analysis that was done back pre-2020, I want to say maybe 2018 or thereabouts, the borough had a consultant who spent a lot of time working with the borough and the military and trying to say, if as they build up Eielson, what's the best case scenario? It was not major. It was expected to continue to grow through the end of this decade. But I think we do have to have that conversation really, and maybe administration is having it, I don't know. I hope that that follow-up is there because the military have been pretty silent. Part of it is they don't know, and even less so now with things that are going on at the federal, the Republican administration level. The last thing that I would like to have on the hop, this is not a savings piece, but it's an impact on savings because as we cut back, as we maybe don't have as many juniors and seniors in the high school, the neighborhood high school, I'm thinking of availability of teachers as we raise PTR. That impacts electives, et cetera, that we really start looking at our graduation credit requirement. And that we may, when we're done, we may have to relook at that. We're way above state requirement. The difficulties of kids getting enough electives. I'm just saying, just putting it out there as a piece, it's not a budget question, it's a realistic, as we determine the budget, that may have a ripple effect on what we can offer kids and what we can realistically expect them to do. I'm not advocating to lessen our requirements, I want that clear, but the ripple effect may be, and when we get to bare bones, we're going to have to.
Mrs. Hardy.
It's mostly a question for the administration. So in balancing act, it says closing Northstar College would give us a $450,000 savings. In the data dashboard, it currently lists their enrollment at 196 students. I'm assuming that must be accurate, but it's what's in there, which would put their basic need with a 680 BSA increase at over 2.3 million. And even with a status quo BSA, it would put them at over 2 million, just a little over 2 million. But in our budget book, it says on page 208 that our general fund expense is only 1.5 million. So how are we saving 450 if the school's bringing in already more than?
So the calculation on the revenue side is comparing the model generated revenue with the students at Northstar College and then conversely with those students at various high schools in the district. So comparing those two models, it's about an $800,000 difference, 800,000 additional dollars, the revenue generated, again, the students at their corresponding attendance area high schools as opposed to at Northstar College.
May I follow up? So is it accurate to say that Northstar College, as it exists within the funding model, pays for itself?
So no, the $450,000 savings, so what we did is we took into consideration the difference in revenue, in state revenue generated by the two scenarios. And then we took into consideration the costs, the tuition and fee costs, and then the staffing costs at Northstar College. And then we compared that to the instructional classroom teachers that would follow those students if they were redistributed to the high schools. So that's an additional cost in the scenario without Northstar College existing.
Follow up one more time.
Go ahead, Ms. Hardy.
I am tracking what you're saying, that we would save money overall in the whole budget if those students were redistributed into their high schools. But currently, as the model stands right now, the students with their BSA going through the formula as Northstar College as a standalone school with a small school factor and all of that, they are generating enough money to cover their own expenses for that program as it exists, or are we supplementing on top of what those students bring in through the foundation formula to make Northstar College happen?
Yeah, I mean, they are, but again, it's the apples to apples comparison is the students at Northstar College, and in scenario B, it's at their attendance area schools and the difference. So yeah, I see your point, Ms. Hardy. They are generating those dollars beyond the listed expenditures, but they would be generating dollars in the high schools as well. So
Yeah, my point was not to argue that the savings isn't real. Totally agree. The
Gotcha.
savings would be real for closing it. It's just for board member and public information to understand that students come, like we say the BSA, follows the students. We hear a lot about school choice, that we are not taking general fund money and adding it to what those students currently attending Northstar College are generating on their own. So as if it were a charter school, it would be a self-sustaining program at their current BSA.
that's correct.
Okay.
Excuse me, Mrs. Burnett would like to speak.
I have Ms. Carol Hubbard in the queue, and then, okay, go ahead, Ms. Bennett.
Thank you. Mrs. Hardy, thank you for those comments and those questions for Northstar College. I think that helps make it a lot more clear. And also thank you, Mr. Doran, for pointing out the safety behind BEST. I wanted to make those comments earlier, Northstar College. Northstar College is absolutely a very safe program. My students utilize UAF for everything without my supervision for many, many years now. So just thank you guys for those comments. But I just wanted to speak up and throw support for Miss Maple's ask behind BEST. We should not be reducing teachers at BEST. We should be maintaining or even increasing to allow for competitiveness. And with that, Mrs. Hardy had actually made some comments earlier on what that would possibly look like to buy out allotments from competing programs. I would also be in favor of possibly seeking that out and seeing what that would be like and possibly doing that. Or even maybe possibly increasing our allotments that we offer to be in line with what Anchorage offers. I know that what Anchorage offers is a lot more, and I understand that takes funding. So that would be I don't ask any board member to support that right now, as that would be something that I would not even support unless we had a substantial increase in the BSA where we could actually make that happen. But it would put us in line with competitiveness and would be something I would like to see in the future. But right now I would throw support behind those two comments from Ms. Maple and Ms. Hardy. Thank you.
Ms. Carol Hubbard.
Thanks. I'll keep it brief. There's only one thing that hasn't been mentioned, and that I will mention, and that was reducing librarians. I know that on the budget tool, it says library aides, and that's for elementary. I was curious to know what it would look like in secondary if we added the librarians on there. I know that's not really a very popular topic, but there it is. Like half or something. I'm not really sure. Because I think there's a librarian at every single middle school and every single high school. And what does that look like? Is it possible? And could we whittle that down and possibly put that into the classroom somewhere else? So that would be one ask on the tool. So we could see what that looks like.
And so just to clarify, Ms.
Carol Hubbard.
Carol Hubbard, thank you. At secondary, there is both a certified librarian as well as a classified library assistant. Could you clarify which position you're referencing there? And the positions would be roughly between 4 and 5, half would be roughly between 4 and 5 positions.
So I was thinking, what I had in my head was the librarian, not the aide.
Okay. We can get that information.
Okay. And then I'm curious to know what the cost would be to increase the Northstar capacity. Northstar 2 capacity, I guess, is the capacity to 49 before it turns into a larger school. So what would that look like if we were to have that option? If we were to invest in BEST, creating some kind of, I don't know, online promotional campaigns. I don't know how we do that. but to make sure that people in Fairbanks understand that not every school is a Fairbanks Northstar Borough School District school, and to promote our school so that kids know and parents know where their funds are going. So I would like to see what that looks like, and then nope, that's a duplicate comment. And then I just had a couple questions about the actual budget itself. Is that something I should email, or would you like me to just ask it right now?
Shoot.
Okay, so there appears to be budgeted for 5 APs in middle school. And as I was going through the budget, I could only find one at each school. Is that a mistake? Please say it's a mistake so we can reduce that budget by 1 AP. I believe it's at North Pole. I believe there's 2 APs. Is there only one, though, currently there? I thought there was only one currently there.
There's a vacancy, and so there are 2 budgeted for North Pole Middle,
Okay, darn.
which we would recommend continuing.
Okay. Well, it was okay. I'm just, so that's the same. And I was curious about counseling technicians for Hutch. What is that? How is that different than a regular counselor?
So a counseling technician is a classified position, and that's the person who comes in at the same time as the principal as far as the start of the year and the close of the school year, and they work really closely with the principal on building the master schedule. So they're doing the work in the Power School program to ensure that all the registrations are correct, that enrollments are correct, that teacher schedules are correct, and that the master schedule in Power School is built. Then, of course, that's kind of beginning and end of year. They do a number of activities throughout the school year as well, depending upon the school a little bit. But as far as registration activities, open house activities, often high schools do post-secondary events where they talk about the FAFSA and enrollment and CTE and apprenticeships and different events throughout the school year as well.
Follow up, Ms. Carol Hubbard?
Does every high school have a counseling technician? I didn't notice it, so I just happened to park on Hutch, and so I just thought I would ask. Is that
I believe they do, yes. Yep, to my understanding, they should all have a counseling tech.
Okay, thank you.
I have Mr. Doran, then Mrs. Hardy.
Mrs. Maple is also waiting.
Mr. Doran.
I know, why don't you go with Ms. Maple, because I know she's looking to,
Oh, right. Yes,
bed.
thank you. Ms. Maple.
Sorry, thank you. I will be quick. It was in my stack of papers and I missed it. And but I wanted to speak to what Miss Carol Hubbard brought up about the librarians, and I just wanted to say that in making cuts to librarians, whether it's the librarian, the aide, an associate, one of I just want to bring attention to it. It wouldn't necessarily allow us to refocus money on a classroom because the direct impact is teachers losing prep time. So that library time benefits other teachers within a building. And I know that we will continue these conversations on a much deeper level. But I just did want to speak to I see the librarian cut as a cut to the classroom because it's a cut to teacher time being able to prioritize their work. So I just wanted to share that. And now I will probably actually log off. Thank you for letting me speak again.
Thank you, Ms. Maple. Now, Mr. Doran.
okay, with that introduction, that was one of the areas I was going to speak to is in terms of the elementary librarians that I would not favor cutting them, even going to cutting them in half, which would basically be a half time. We've already cut librarians by 3 under the current scenario of closing schools, and actually arguably more with the reduced staffing at Salcha. But they are part of the prep piece. They are also in most, well, I'll say for many schools, they are part of the reading piece right now, and working with groups. The, you know, I would certainly, if we were to pull, so the librarian, elementary librarian, which is a classified position as a library assistant, the music and PE cover the preps. If we start cutting out the preps and maybe offering a librarian a chance to be a regular classroom teacher, knowing they do not need certification, we can get people into the streamline of getting certified with emergency certs. And then we still need to cover preps, which is where we would probably have to look at a real schedule change. There are lots of ways of looking at it. My piece would be put it at the end of the day and release students early. And we just have a shorter student contact day, which is still well within the parameters of the state guidelines. But as it stands right now, that becomes really problematic to cut the elementary librarians and to be able to cover bases, especially as we're putting more students in fewer schools. The other is we had great conversation last year about the secondary library assistants, actually the last couple of years, and I appreciate they're not back there. At this point, if we go to bare bones, it's a different story, and that these certified librarians at secondary, I believe, need to be kept in mind for as part of accreditation. And I guess a question I would have, since we've done district-wide K-12 accreditation, whether how that is maintained in terms of library needs served at the elementary. So another aspect of it. With Hutch, some of the conversation we've had on that, and part of one of the elements, if we went to a CTE center, that would mean there would be staffing reductions. We wouldn't, for instance, need a counselor there because they'd have access to the counselors at their home high school. I know models being looked at, so maybe students are spending half a day at Hutch, and then going back for core courses and other electives, but they would get their CTEs, and there'd be less back and forth and jockeying of whether you're late for a class period or whichever, but making access for those classes to more students. But what that savings would be. And I guess it's looking not only, it might be a conversation for this year, maybe a reality that we need to look at this year, but it also helps prep us for the following year or down the line as we look at some different models. And then the piece of, again, perhaps growing our enrollment. And I want to reemphasize that every parent is making a choice of the school their child goes to. Whether it's their first choice, some would like to get into a different school as an out of attendance or in a lottery. They may not get, but they're choosing to send their children to their neighborhood school in many cases because they can walk there, or it's an easy ride, or it's near their office. I mean, there's a lot of different things. And we can look at variations on how we actually implement OAA, and the district has made great improvements of OAA that you don't have to annually do it. I first started, it was the lineup every May, and it was, you're there, but you may not be there the following year. So, looking at those options. So my point is really looking at being mindful. We may have two schools coming back into our midst. What if we really made them, went back and relooked at there being neighborhood-centered schools, use focus, whatever model or perspective on it. But what would really be the savings of maybe doing that? If we did a focus or we did a magnet, you don't have to have the same program. You don't have to have the same staffing. It can be different. And if that drew in 100, 200 students to our district, we have to talk about ripple effects, because does that draw off, like we talk about Northstar College, it does draw students out, but it offers students some things. So I'm just putting it on the table and would like to know what that cost differential may be. I am mindful of at least one of the buildings that were closed, say Pearl Creek building, was for some structural things. It may not be available for anyone. What's the cost of us being landlords there, let alone as district? Are we really saving or not? And but I'd like to look at what those neighborhood models might be and what those cost factors.
Excuse me, Mrs. Burnett has her hand up.
Okay, I have Miss Hardy in the queue. Okay, go ahead, Miss Burnett.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind the board that it is 8:05. Dr. Meinert has State of the Schools tomorrow with Chamber, and I know he would like to be able to do that functionably. So if we could just wrap up, anything that we would like to add to the balancing act for administration tonight and get support behind it so that they may go forward and add those, and then we can have those in there for our use.
Thank you, Miss Burnett. Miss Hardy.
Okay, try to keep it brief. Page 197, there is a $50,000 allotment for advertisement for BEST. It was in last year, it's in this year, and it's why we finally have our stuff on the buses. It used to drive Mayor Ward crazy. We fixed that problem. Then to librarians in secondary schools, I just want to reiterate how important they are. They provide so many services beyond what their job title talks about. They are clubs. They provide a safe place for students to eat outside of the busy lunchroom. They are often the person, if you ask students, who they feel like they have the greatest connection to, especially students who seem to be struggling. They gravitate towards our librarians. They also usually handle all of the technology issues for our schools, including Chromebook maintenance, including all of that nitty-gritty. And Chromebooks can be a huge time suck for staff and for anybody. It's a lot to keep going. So it seems like a cut that maybe wouldn't be felt, but it would be felt. As somebody who taught at Tannenall Middle, let me tell you, Miss Martin's library was hopping 24/7. You went in there and there were kids. I support looking at custodial to see if there are possible savings since we've outsourced. And that's it.
Miss Doolian.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna, Ms. Maple put on a suggestion out there to look at the cost of what it would be to have a magnet school. I think that Mr. Doran was trying to also weave that into his recommendation. One of the things that we were asked to vote on when we were voting on school closures, and I was corrected of this when I just tried to innovate with the motion of removing Hunter, and then was reminded that we're not voting on what the future of the school is. We're voting on it as a neighborhood school. There has been a lot of conversation around Pearl Creek in particular. And one of the things that I've talked to a couple of the people who were involved in that magnet proposal, who are not involved in the charter proposal, is could that magnet move? Could there be a magnet in our current footprint, as we've stated, that could support? It was a great proposal. And again, that's not what we were voting on. We were voting on the neighborhood school. So I'd like to see the cost of that in our current footprint, if it's possible. I think that that's something that Ms. Mabel was asking for, and if I may, Mr. Doran was alluding to as well, what that would look like. And if it's possible, if it's even possible to do that next year, or if it's more realistic to stand something up within our current footprint in the 2026-27 academic year. Ms. Hardy, you had mentioned the cost of supplementing, of kind of adding that balance to what other correspondence families have at different out of district correspondence programs. I support that as well. What would be the cost to bring them over? If their balances are what's keeping them at out of district, but if they came over to us and they have access to our facilities, and again, I see that as a kind of a lower hanging fruit of where we can grow our enrollment more quickly, because the amount of students who live within our borough who are in out of district correspondence is quite high. The CTC Center at Hutch, I would like to also see that as well. Is that something that we could expedite this year? What is there a savings? Is there a cost? Is it even possible to make those changes within this year for next year? And what are the budget implications? I would like to see that as well, as to tack on to what Mr. Doran had said. And then another thing I'm going to just reiterate, and although many of us including myself, put PTR down to 25 for elementary, imagine a world, and I'm in this world right now, so imagine the world that I'm in with my 5-year-old who's going to be going into kindergarten, and I'm at a private preschool, and the amount of terror in my fellow preschool families about sending their 5-year-old that they've had in a preschool program next year entering kindergarten with 27 students in it, 27.5, is enough to say, wait a second. Imagine a world, and so everybody wants to get on the charter schools because of class size. Imagine if we could lower our PTR for K-5 to 23. Imagine that world. Imagine the draw and what that could potentially do for us. If we did that across the district, across our whole borough, that anytime that we're talking about increasing, innovating, we're throwing dice out. We don't really know if we create a lottery, is there a ripple effect? If we lower PTR, the ripple effect, the odds are the ripple effect comes back on us, and our enrollment increases. And when our enrollment increases, our revenue increases. So that's why I would really advocate for us to try to get that PTR investment in K through 5.
Mr. Doran?
And I know we're moving towards a wrap up, but the conversation is important because we only have 3 weeks ahead of us, really. And spring break is in the middle of that. So thinking, and the question has come up, should we turn all our schools into charter schools? And what would that mean? You know, especially when we look at saying some schools are up for consideration and some are not. And that might be a district-wide thing. So just putting it out there as we look at scenarios and we find out what the legislature and the governor actually do. When we're talking about Hutch, I'm also trying to be mindful in terms of the potential partnership between Hutch and West Valley being so close together, and thinking of students who are enrolled in Hutch and want that piece, to help them transition towards graduation, where we can do some work for them to make sure they get their core courses, depending upon what that change at touch would be. So just putting that in the hopper. The last two things I think that I'll say tonight is I couldn't help but think I used to have this sign on my door for over a decade. Don't let tough times stop good teaching. And I think we have to try and remind ourselves not to let tough times stop good education as we move forward. And the quote that I've referenced, but I actually have it, I found where I wrote it down. Wes Underwood, who was at the time with FNA, shared a comment in this room that's applicable very much to the budget. He was using it in a little different context, but it's equally applicable, that we keep in mind. Numbers count, yes, but humanity exceeds statistics. And I think when we look at budget, every dollar represents a kid, is behind that. And so, and our staff, and that, I guess I wanted to particularly share that, given that many of our federal employee colleagues are under the gun, similar to we have in terms of education, and that throughout the process, we keep that humanity in mind. And so, anyway, my 2 cents.
Okay, I'm going to say a few things. Put myself in the queue here. So on the subject of cutting librarians or library associates, I would also agree that with members who have expressed that that's not something we should go for. I'm concerned for the similar reasons that Mrs. Hardy spoke about, the function that they provide for our schools. I also, can't help but think about, the Guys Read program. I used to be on the board of Guys Read and Gals Read, and the librarians are essential to making that program work. So we would even have ripple effects beyond just what's happening in the schools with our ability to bring in volunteers and programs that help our students. I do want to see transportation on the revenue side of our budget, increased transportation funding, both at the level that's proposed by the governor and at the level that we were asking for in our legislative priorities. I would actually, this is just an idea, but I was thinking about the funding from the borough, and that it may be difficult to get to the 60 million. But I do plan on advocating for the borough to give us even more than that. Not saying that I'm optimistic about it, but what I would like to see maybe for budget purposes is having an additional, having that, let's see, we have it up to 64 million, but I would think that 4 million above the 60 million from the mayor's proposed budget could be seen as one-time funding. I don't know if we need to adjust that in balancing act, but just kind of throwing that out there. If we can get additional money from the borough, it might be one time from their savings, and in which case I would advocate for, that we would put that in our fund balance. Borough has savings right now. Our savings continues to be in jeopardy, and it's not where we want it to be. So just throwing that out there. I also would support looking more at focus or magnet models. I think there's some challenges in budgeting for that because we need to develop what those models would actually be, but I am interested in pursuing those options. So I'd throw that, since it was discussed, I'd throw that out there. I also wanted to just talk briefly about what it would mean if, Mr. Doran has suggested that the state may approve charters, even if the district turns them down or says that we need to wait. I think that's a reasonable precaution to be thinking of, but that would represent essentially losing local governance of our district. That would be a power play that, I mean, it would negate the purpose of having a school board if the state can just open any school. It's very concerning that we have been told by the state over and over again to live within our means, to reduce our footprint, to be efficient and streamlined. We get this message all the time from our funding sources. And then we do that, and we see this potential for them to make decisions for us that are contrary to the decisions that we've made trying to comply with their requests. This is a very the situation doesn't make any sense. I'm just going to say it like that. It does not make any sense for the state to be taking the control away from us like that. I would say that we should push back against anything like that, rather than assume that that's going to be done to us. And I think that's covers most of what I wanted to talk about in response to some of the discussion. Mr. Doran.
Okay, just a clarification, and I'll also, that Dr. Bryant might want to also address it, but we should be well aware that right now the state has the final say under the original law for charter schools in this state. The State Board of Education has the final say. They can accept or reject basically the local district. Right now, the law says you have to go through, at least approach the district. The district effectively is making a recommendation by their approval or non-approval. But it goes, if the district doesn't approve, the charter group can appeal that effectively to the state board. The state board can overrule that, and that's in current law. As long as the charter has worked with the district. There have been times when conversations between a potential charter group and a district, they've come and the charter group has said, oh, we're not ready, or we decided not to go ahead with something, and that's a different story. But if they do, despite what the district says, the board says, it's the state board who makes the final decision. Also, and this has happened in this state, that a district recommended effectively a charter school. They approved the charter school. When it went to the state board rejected it, and it was rejected. But it's the state board who holds currently the final decision. And I know there's been some misnomer of that in terms of the governor's position on charter schools, which is that they don't even have to go through the district. But when it goes to the state board, if they approve it, the districts are the ones that have to deal with it. So it is a reality. Hopefully we may not, but it is a reality if that's where it goes. So that's a clarification that I think is important to keep in mind. So I don't know if you have something.
Appreciate that, Mr. Doran. Dr. Miner?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. The only slight difference is if the district does deny it, a charter application, that it then goes to the Commissioner of Education. Commissioner of Education can weigh in on it. If that individual approves it, then that would go to the state board. And so there is an extra layer in there if our local board currently denies a charter application.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I wanted to just add as well that when we are looking at or discussing magnet or focus models, or even adding charter schools, I would like to see those items on a like the add back list, or what if we're going to put together something that says this is what we can do with more money. I'd like those to be in that document or whatever. Go ahead, Dr. Meinert.
All right. I want to talk magnets and Hutch and just be really realistic about capacity in terms of standing up new schools, new ideas, different models at Hutch. I think it's realistic to do that for the 26-27 school year. I do not think it's realistic to do that within the next couple weeks for your budget purposes and then create it for the next school year. I think our strongest schools going forward are going to be those that work with that school community to build out the model that they want. We could certainly do that from administration or from the board's perspective right here, but I believe we would miss the mark in many instances. And so for Hutch specifically, Assistant Superintendent Gillum has started work on that. We know that's a priority going into next year. We've heard that from the board. We've heard that from the community that we want to relook at that. So Ms. Gillum's fully aware of that, and we'll go full steam ahead and be sure that we're ready for the budget cycle next year in terms of what that looks like and have stakeholders at the table to provide input on that. If the board or the community, we know there's been a lot of talk around magnet or focus schools. I also think that's best done at the local level. Assistant Superintendent LaPlante and I have had many conversations in the last month of what that process might look like for individual neighborhood schools to go about examining what a model or a theme might look like for their neighborhood schools. As Mr. Doran mentioned earlier, that doesn't have to cost additional money. Certainly we put additional funds into Barnett Magnet now, but just because it has a focus or a theme doesn't mean that we have to add additional funding to it. But I do think for the board and the community to understand the capacity of the administration and schools to do that work right now in preparation for next spring is not likely in terms of turning that around quickly. When we were talking about Pearl Creek, that community had already done a tremendous amount of work. And so that community could have stood up that school relatively quickly because they had done almost a year's worth of work. But to think that we would do the same thing for other schools without a community behind it, I think is unrealistic. And so just wanted that to be on the table for the board. Not that it can't be done, but I think our best schools and the best innovative creations we're going to make are going to be with those neighborhood communities involved in the planning process.
Thank you. Mrs. Hardy.
And it's just because it's been brought up now a few different times. Have we received any guidance from DEED on what their interpretation of our charter policy is and what they're expecting?
We have currently not received anything from the Department of Ed directly through the district.
Did we request anything from them?
We have, and have not heard back. I am supposed to have an upcoming meeting with the commissioner, and so hopefully we'll have some conversations about that.
Mr. Doran.
Okay, just relative to Hutch, I think it is important what you're saying is when we have stakeholders, because the prior two iterations, the current iteration and the prior iteration of Hutch had an awful lot of community stakeholders, union member leadership and members, business, that is really important because they are also the ones who back up the actual implementation of the CTE program and the opportunities for students to work in local shops that I think is really, really important. So I think your point, whatever we do, whenever we do it, in terms of really having those people highly at the table, and they were a tremendous part, and that building was a real partnership between the university, the business community, and including the unions and all of those, and the other trade centers, training centers, and the district. And it's a shared building that, and funds that were drawn from each pot to create that. So I think that is a piece of both an opportunity that we have going forward. So.
Ms. Carol
Excuse me,
Hubbard.
Mrs. Burnett has her hand up.
Okay, we'll go to Ms. Carol Hubbard and then Ms. Burnett.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say that as an an advocate for reading literacy, sorry, it's getting late. My first priority is always going to be elementary classroom PTR. Always low elementary classroom PTR, number one, all the time, every day. So I also, though, would support and want to support lower PTR in middle school and high school. Those would come next. But I think that classroom size is one of the most important things that everybody complains about, and that it's a great, from a teaching standpoint, it's much easier to teach smaller classes. And you can have personal relationships with kids. You can reach them better on a personal level. You can go deeper into your subject matter. And discipline is much less with smaller class sizes. That said, would we be able to have a button on the elementary school that reduces the class size to the lowest, alongside the lowest number, which I think is 23? And then also like half was Mr. Dorn, did you say half the kinder aides? Was that one of the suggestions, that was half?
That wasn't my
Mrs. Julian?
yes.
Okay, it was half. Okay, and half the kinder aides. So minus half of the aides, but bring the class size down to 23, the PTR to 23. Please.
Mr. Dorn.
Just a clarification, the class size of 23, do you want K-5 for the whole elementary? Okay.
Ms. Burnett.
Yeah, thank you. Due to the time, I'd like to move to adjourn.
If you'll allow me just to mention one additional thing that I remembered as Dr. Meinert was discussing magnet models. It had someone brought up earlier, advertising for best, and I'm glad that we do that. And my thought is that, our neighborhood schools, whether or not we're calling them a focus or a magnet, they often do innovate, and they have their own communities and their own cultures. And so one thing that I think that we could do as a board and as a district is call that out more often, talk about what's happening at specific schools, give it a name. Maybe we do call it a focus, or maybe we say there's programs here and we advertise that, like actually put it out there to the community, because I feel there are many misconceptions about what happened in our schools. So I don't know if that's necessarily a budget issue, but I do think that calling more attention to the incredible things that our teachers do, the innovations that are already present, is a wonderful idea for attracting students back to our district. Mr. Dorn.
I really want to second that, and especially when you talked about it doesn't need to have a name, but we may need to really market more of what our schools offer, because it is really amazing what we see in our schools. And if you're doing good education, you may not have to give it a name, a flashy name, but we need to highlight what it is doing and offering. So thank you for bringing that up.
Ms. Julian.
Thank you. I have to say that I totally agree. It's not free to do that. This is the world that I work in. That is an investment on the communication side. And I saw that there was a hit to communications, I think last year that we took, or we a couple years ago. So I saw that in the budget. Yes, we need to do that. If we're going to do it well and in a strategic way that reaches target audiences and has a communication plan behind it, we have to put some money into it. But I would be also in favor of if that's a $50,000 increase that matches kind of our best advertising budget, I would be interested in that, even if it's something that we end up outsourcing to a shop to do that work.
I would agree with that, Dr. Miner.
Thank you for mentioning that, because we have a team of 2 that does our communications, and we often get these requests to do more highlights and more branding and different things for the district, and we would love to do that, but are stretched in the capacity. And so thinking of if there is support for $50,000 on the side of our neighborhood schools, $50,000 on the side of BEST, I might encourage the board to put back a position within our communications department rather than outsourcing that work, because we would get a lot more product out of somebody that's actually within our communications department rather than outsourcing it. Outsourcing the communications work becomes very expensive. And so, if we're walking down that path, we can get you numbers on that, but that would be my recommendation for the board.
Okay. So I'm going to support Ms. Burnett's comment, but we'll go to Mr. Doran.
Particularly relevant to this point, I would also support that increase, and but I think I would consider bringing both together, and because we don't. It's not marketing one school, it's marketing our schools. And that would give us a better pool and maybe some range within that 50 to 100,000. And I think it's also important that we think it might be a position, it might also have to, how do we get that? Do we need, it costs to do the advertisements, to do things like that, but that we really do market, because that could grow our enrollment. We're not looking at just maintaining, we're looking to grow. And with hundreds, if not thousands, out there that we could perhaps attract, I think it would be well worth our money.
Okay. Noting the time, and I think we have accomplished the major goal of the evening, so I'm going to, without objection, say we are adjourned.